tour. So I'll go first. My name is Hal Metzler. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Hyattsville. And Taylor, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Welcome to those that are online with us tonight. Thanks for joining us. My name's Taylor. I'm the Transportation Manager, also in our Department of Public Works.
And then Graham.
Hi, my name is Graham Carell Allen, and I'm a public artist and placemaker based out of Baltimore. And we're excited to be working with Hyattsville on creating these street art pilot projects.
Great. And then Melvin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melvin. I am the Director of Operations and Engagement with Graham, and we are definitely excited to be able to share this project with that Hyattsville is going to be piloting with all of you tonight.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody. So just a quick background of what we're looking to do. We have two locations that we are working on for some placemaking and for some traffic calming. The locations are the Church Alley for a placemaking project and Jefferson and 40th Avenue for some street art and for some traffic calming purposes. We have set up this meeting to kind of give everyone a background of what's going on, how you can participate, and I'll let Graham talk about that in just a moment. I do want to say that we will be soliciting feedback through May 5th. So if you know people that could not attend tonight, ask them to visit the Hello Hyattsville page where they can find all the links and information that we will be discussing tonight, and you can provide some feedback through that Hello Hyattsville site. With that, guess I'll turn it over to Graham and let him talk about what we're looking to get back from everybody and how this process is going to work. Graham.
Thank you, Hal, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation with you all. So I do see that there's a question in the chat asking the addresses. And so we are looking at Jefferson and 40th as one site and Church Place at Gallatin as the other site. And so what I'm going to do is share a little bit about our process as artists and as placemakers, and how the public, you all, can participate in helping create these places. So first, I'm going to share a little presentation. All right. So the Hyattsville Street Art Pilot Project. I am Graham Carell Allen, as mentioned earlier. I'm a public artist, and I can be reached at graham@grahamprojects.com. Our website, where you can see examples of our work, is grahamprojects.com. We are also across social media at Graham Projects. So my company is a design build studio, and we make cities more inclusive and livable through public art, placemaking, and civic engagement. Building on our collective backgrounds in art, planning, and advocacy, myself and our team produce participatory projects and lead social initiatives in the service of pedestrians and places. And so we love cities. We love suburbs. We love making places that are safe to walk around, and doing so in collaboration with communities and stakeholders. So I have kind of a sample of our core team here. So, some of the photos from our project sites, including myself, Melvin, who introduced himself earlier. We have Isabel, who's our communications associate, Javon Towson, who's also an artist and a facilitator, Zoe Roan Hopkins, who's a landscape designer, and Q and Mar, who are very seasoned installers that we work with. One project that is a nice comparison to what will be taking place on Church Street is something that we did called Curbside Commons. which took place early on in the pandemic as a part of a program here in Baltimore called Design for Distancing. And this was an emergency program, like a lot of cities did, to create safe places outside for people to be able to gather while observing public health protocols and staying safe amidst, what was an evolving understanding of the pandemic at that time. The goal of Design for Distancing was to help main streets throughout Baltimore reopen with these outdoor installations. And I had the honor of working in collaboration with the Hamilton Laurelville Main Street organization, a major property owner in that area, and a whole host of small businesses and other artists on re-envisioning how we could create a safer Main Street where people could gather outside, and still enjoy the services from these small businesses that exist along Harford Road in Northeast Baltimore. What you see here are some photos of what the corridor looked like before installation. And so they had kind of long city blocks that didn't have mid-block crosswalks or, wheelchair ramps mid-block for people to be able to get up on the sidewalk. And so if you were a wheelchair rider getting out of a service vehicle or maybe using a motorized device, and you might have to travel a bit of ways to find a ramp. There was no outdoor seating whatsoever, kind of narrow sidewalks, unmarked crosswalks, and speeding traffic. We then met with over a dozen business owners and community members to hear about their ideas for what would help their businesses safely reopen. And that really drove the program for what we designed and then ultimately built. And so here you can see we were working with a tight budget, but we used that money to create ADA compliant wheelchair ramps. So that stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a law that requires streetscapes and buildings to be accessible for people with disabilities. We installed these ramps at critical locations along the main street. We introduced outdoor seating in the form of benches that we were able to anchor onto the asphalt itself. We also moved over we actually closed a car lane. It was a 2-lane road heading north and a 1-lane heading south. So we matched up the north lane with the south lane by eliminating one of the car lanes and moving the on-street parking out into that former car lane, thereby opening up what was previously the parking lane into the public space. And we helped define that public space with decorative barriers and pavement art, planters, shade, and wayfinding stencils. So wayfinding is typically visual cues that will direct you to places you might want to go. And so in this case, we really wanted to highlight the small businesses and the culture and other amenities along the corridor. And so we worked with another local artist named Annie Howe, who is a paper cut artist, and she designed these different stencils, which I then fabricated and we installed all along the corridor, helping guide people along the several blocks to patronize their small businesses and be able to gather safely outdoors, such as during this First Friday event where all the businesses stayed open late, like 8 p.m. or so. The coffee shop, which would otherwise close at 3, stayed open late, and they had a pop-up pizza parlor. So folks were able to walk from the parking behind the buildings and side streets, come out and enjoy some of these, special treats, and really be able to regather even despite what was happening in the larger public health situation. This has been a really successful project, and it's still there after 3 years, with very minimal maintenance. And it is something that the neighborhood looks forward to ultimately creating in a more permanent way when it comes time to resurface the street with new asphalt. I know that the councilman is looking at that as an opportunity to formalize, some of these, what we call quick build structures. The second project that I'm sharing is it takes place on Whitelock Street and Brookfield Avenue in a neighborhood called Reservoir Hill in West Baltimore, not too far from where I live. This is a really important intersection where there are 2 apartment buildings on 2 corners, and there's an urban farm on another corner, and then a green space on the last corner. And it was really a major place for people to gather and enjoy, and yet it was experiencing a lot of dangerous car driving. There were 3 out of the 4 crosswalks were not marked, and people, were having to kind of dash across the street and really watch out for their own lives in order to take part in the community spaces. So we were invited by the neighborhood to help to reinstall the crosswalks, but also introduce what we call traffic calming. And so traffic calming is, in the most basic sense, slowing down cars so that they drive at a safe speed, so that motorists will have, appropriate time to react and respond, to ensure that, if somebody is crossing the street, they'll be able to yield to them, and thereby, preventing pedestrian injuries and fatalities. Traffic calming can come in a lot of different forms. And so in the case of Hyattsville, we're pleased to be working with not only the city, but also their consultant Tool Design on the traffic calming engineering. And as artists, we are working within the traffic calming, as you'll see in future slides, to create public art that further enhances that by brightening the intersection and drawing more attention to these pedestrian spaces. So in this plan view, you can kind of see an abstracted version of the intersection that has a set of curb extensions, also known as bump outs, that are created with line striping, essentially the road markings that are used for things like crosswalks and stop bars, but using that to also demark, a space where cars shouldn't be parking anyways. And defining that as pedestrian space, it helps to secure sight lines for cars to see, when it's safe for them to proceed through the intersection or to turn. It also effectively shortens the crosswalk distance from a typical width of, let's say, 40 feet across the street to 20 feet, one travel lane in this direction, the other travel lane in that direction. And in this case, we were working during the pandemic. So while we had started with in-person meetings, we had to convert to virtual engagement. And whereas, we always like to create opportunities for neighbors to share their public art ideas through in-person workshops and activities, we also wanted to create a way for them to do that online. And so we worked with some developers on this, creating this online tool, which is available at makeplacehappen.com. And the tool is called Coloro. Coloro stands for Coloring the Right of Way, ROW. Right of way is basically just means the street and the sidewalk. That is the public right of way. Everything kind of between, the building facades on a typical main street. And in this case, you are able to and invited to, through this website, draw like you would in like MS Paint or even with just crayons on a plan of the intersection in real life, your ideas for public art. If you don't want to draw, you don't have to. I'll show you how you can also simply type out ideas, or if you just want to attach some photos as examples of other stuff you've seen, work in the neighborhood that you think is representative of the local culture, anything that you feel like would be something that could serve as fantastic, fun inspiration for this artwork. We want to see it and we want to read about it. And so through this website, we heard that people were interested in celebrating the community farm, vegetables, diversity, history, bright colors. We also saw some really cool attachments that were uploaded, examples of the historic architecture, the poppy flowers growing at the community farm, different types of athletics, basketball, the community yoga classes, and of course, these little sketches that people had done using that online Coloring the Right of Way tool. With all this inspiration in mind, we developed 3 design options: Whitelock Wellness, Reservoir Revival, and Seasonal Turn. Right, Whitelock Wellness essentially represented, kind of different activities that take place around that intersection, and we took kind of like symbolic drawings of each one of these things and scaled them up to the size of an intersection, one for each corner. So we have flower, basketball, kale leaf, and yoga. Reservoir Revival is more of like a pattern-oriented work inspired by the historical details of the architecture. And then Seasonal Turn is an abstract design that is meant to represent the diversity of the neighborhood, as well as the turning of the seasons that you can witness taking place in the community farm. So we have purple for spring, green for summer, brownish red for the fall, and blues for the winter. We shared these out through an online form and during meetings, and asked people what their preference was. And as you can see, the Seasonal Turn was had a clear majority of preference among the 100+ folks who participated in this survey. With that in mind, we went about updating the designs in coordination with traffic engineers so that they would synthesize or work nicely with the bump outs or curb extensions that effectively slow down cars and shorten the crosswalk distances. The artwork itself fills in these bump outs, which makes the intersection brighter, draws the attention of motorists, and really highlights visually, hey, this is where people are crossing the street on foot. So let's be mindful of that, stop at the stop bar and yield to the pedestrians. And here's a bird's eye view of our project taking place during the Community Paint Day, which is something that we always enjoy doing with communities. Typically, myself and our crew will go out and install the artwork in the street itself. And we use very high quality, commercial grade materials and colors, which are safe for the environment and are also ADA compliant. They have a very, what's known as high friction quality. And so in other words, they're very grippy. If you're to touch this, what some people might say like, oh, you painted the street. Well, we don't actually use paint. We use a special coating system. And if you touch that coating, it feels like sandpaper. So it's very safe to walk on, not slippery at all. So we had installed this work. And then you can see here during the Community Paint Day, neighbors came out and helped extend the artwork up onto the sidewalk through these branches or roots that extend in all directions. After this was installed, we saw people putting it to use, families, taking advantage of the newly striped and colorized crosswalks, folks at the bus stops, getting on and off of their transit, and overall, a really marked improvement in safety. And so I did work with some social design fellows from Maryland Institute College of Art on conducting a before and after observational survey. So before the installation, only 28% of cars would yield at the four-way intersection. Afterwards, that flipped to 74% of motorists yielding and stopping where they should have been. Before the installation, only 37% of pedestrians understood where they should be crossing the street, where it was safest and best to do so. And afterwards, 75% of pedestrians knew where the crosswalks were and now use them. And so we can really see how this type of traffic calming and artwork can help to guide people to operate their vehicles and walk in safe ways. Thereby, once again, reducing injuries, saving lives, and beautifying the neighborhood. So we've had a lot of positive feedback on this work. And we're excited to do similar projects in Hyattsville. So similar to what we've done with many communities in Baltimore and beyond, we're working with Hyattsville through the city's own community engagement website, which is hellohyattsville.com. And we have a project page on there, which is for the street art pilot. And so if you follow this link, you can read more about the two intersections that we are working with the city on. And then from there, you'll find links to the makeplacehappen.com color rows for each one of these intersections. We're excited to be soliciting your input and ideas through both this online drawing and web forms, as well as in person during the month of April and into May. So April 29th, we'll be participating in the Hyattsville annual celebration where everyone's invited to come and help draw their own ideas. And combining those with what we receive online during the month of May, we'll develop a set of design options, and then those will be shared back out through the city's channels for folks to vote on and provide additional feedback. So you might say, oh, I love option B, but can we tweak that from, you know, purple to indigo? That really actually syncs up with our community mascot or whatever it may be. We'll be looking forward to updating the final design and then building it out in the community. So I'm going to exit this slideshow and then take you over to this project page just to kind of give you a little sneak preview. This is the hellohyattsville.com/en/project/street art. And here you can read more about the two intersections, Jefferson and 40th Avenue and Church Place. A little bit about, you know, why we're using this high contrast street art to enhance pedestrian safety and beautify the intersection. Some examples of our work, and then links out to where you can participate. So we have two buttons towards, you know, if you scroll down the page, there's a button for Design Jefferson and 40th and another button for Design Church Place. So either one of those will take you over to the makeplacehappen.com website. And to give you an example of the Jefferson and 40th intersection, I'll click on this tile and it takes you to the color row for Jefferson and 40th. Here you can select a color such as fuchsia, and maybe you want a pen size that's a little bit bigger. I'm going to pick something in the middle here, and I'm going to draw a happy face. And then and I'll give it, you know, like yellow eyebrows, let's say, for fun. This is my design. I can then click on the button on the lower right-hand side to download that, save it to however I want. If you're on a smartphone, you would screenshot it, and then you can click on the Submit Your Artwork button, type in your name if you'd like, your email address, and if you want to share it over social media, we'd love to highlight that. Attach your file. You can write a description if you'd like. And if you don't want to draw, just write a description. That's great too. And if you don't feel like writing and you already have an image on your phone, let's say, feel free to attach those on these buttons as well and share any additional thoughts or questions before you hit submit. That was a real quick tutorial. If you ever are back on the website and you want to understand how to use it again, we have this glowing question mark button at the top of the page. If you click that, it gives you instructions on how to use this on a desktop. And if you're on a mobile phone, it'll give you a slightly different set of instructions on how to use it for your mobile phone. That about does it for our presentation. I look forward to answering any questions now and seeing and reading about your ideas in the not too distant future.
Great. Thank you, Graham. If anyone has any questions, please use the raise hand feature and we'll let you ask them. All right, we got one. Laura, I will allow you to talk now. All right, Laura.
Hey there. Thanks for the presentation. And full disclosure, I live on the corner of Jefferson and 40th. So I'm very invested in sort of the outcome of this corner, of course, because it's been a bit of a pain point for the amount of traffic running the intersection. So one, I missed it, but I was wondering if you could repeat. I thought you had shared some statistic about the number, sort of the vehicle compliance post the white lock thing. I missed the before and after, so I'm curious about that. And the second one may be more for DPW. I'm interested in, you know, does this sort of, is there still potential for discussion about a raised intersection here, or is the painting sort of the solution to traffic, blowing through the stop sign.
Sure. If you don't mind, Graham, I'll answer that part first, and then I can let you talk about the statistics there. So we are currently working with tool designed to evaluate the whole stretch of Jefferson Street. Last summer, we did the temporary, bump outs and added additional crosswalks and a couple other features to try to help with the bikeability and pedestrian safety along the street. They are looking at that this summer, and we're actually going to have some additional community meetings to talk about that portion of it. Right now, we're going to do the street art, and then we could still talk about doing a raised intersection. They take that takes a little while to get designed and funded and then installed. So there's the opportunity to maybe do some initial art, and then in next year, if we build a raised crosswalk, we can still add some art back to it or change that. So we are going to have some more discussions about that. So I definitely invite you to keep an eye out for those meetings as well.
Thank you. And yeah, very excited too about the art. So I don't want to minimize that I'm not excited about that. I think it's a great idea. I've seen it work in a lot of places. So thank you.
Sure.
Great. Yeah. So to be clear, the example that I gave of the project we did in West Baltimore on Whitelock and Brookfield, that did include the, sort of these bump outs and curb extensions that we filled in with the art and the crosswalks. For your intersection, we're essentially looking at the center of the intersection. So actually filling in the whole middle with the art. So it really, is defined as not just a thoroughfare, but more of a place, a street, something that should be cherished and not just, breeze through like a highway. I kind of point that out just to kind of distinguish between, some of the engineering without getting too far into Tool's wheelhouse. I will be deferring to them and the city, of course, on how we can best integrate the artwork into that. But we are looking forward to creating artwork in the middle of the street. My understanding is there's not necessarily going to be bump outs, but the artwork itself will be drawing a lot of attention to that. It'll be drawing attention to the crosswalks right next to your house. And we can also extend that artwork up onto the sidewalks as well. And so those are all options that we're excited to kind of work with you and other folks in the community on envisioning and then ultimately making. With regards to your question about the statistics, we went from at that intersection that I gave you an example of, initially it was something like, 25% of the cars were yielding. And then after the installation, that went, it was 28% of the cars were yielding. That after the installation, it jumped up to 74% of the cars yielded. So it was a pretty significant, improvement in terms of the motorist behavior. And sometimes we found that with a major kind of visual change like this, it does help to sort of reset the driving culture a little bit. It kind of puts the motorist in a new circumstance that they kind of have to like rethink and be like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Proceed cautiously, hopefully. And we can't promise that they're all going to behave nicely, but when we create these installations, overall, we do see, people behaving differently. So we look forward to similar improvements in your area. And if you do share some ideas online, please do identify that you're the resident on the corner, because that's really important to know.
Will do. Thank you.
Great. I did want to answer one of the questions in the Q&A. Someone asked if this was a pilot or are we intending to do this in other places in the city? So yes, this is a pilot program to see how this works for the city and kind of get feedback from the residents. And depending on how that kind of feedback comes back to us, and depending on the different scenarios, our goal is to do some additional street art throughout the city in different neighborhoods where it's applicable. So yes, depending on if you like what we're doing and you like what Graham puts out there, definitely let us know and let your council members know, because we would look to do this in other locations. I see we got another question. Is it Demian? I'm going to allow you to talk, and please correct me on your name. I apologize. Okay, you're free to ask your question.
Sorry, I think I'm having technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Nope.
Don't use Zoom on my phone currently. My name's Damian Rybach. Hal, can you give me a thumbs up if you hear me? Sorry. Great, thank you. I live next to Laura on Jefferson. My one comment is Graham, I think that work is fantastic, and I love, for living in Hyattsville, thinking that, we can incorporate art and community to, help us feel more like a walkable social community neighborhood. So I think that's fantastic, what I've seen you do before, and I look forward to it being done here. I do want to just voice my concern, Hal. I guess this is mostly directed towards DPW. And I might have expressed this before, but it's been a number of years since we as a community reached out to the city to understand the process for addressing the traffic concerns on Jefferson, and starting with a petition and engaging the city council, and then working with some trials of things. So when I hear that we're still considering things like other things, we've checked off a number of things, but if we're still considering like a raised platform in the intersection, if that's still on the table, it just seems like it would be a waste of money and exercise to not sort of plan these things in order. Like, can't we figure that out? So I just wanted to make that comment. And my other comment and I guess request is, it would be really nice to have more transparency in perhaps some of the traffic data that's being collected. How are traffic counts, increasing, decreasing? What's the benchmark that we're making decisions on when things don't, pan out, or, cars decide they can just drive, straight through our bollards, things like that. Can there be a little bit more transparency perhaps in some of the traffic statistical data, that we're trying to curb, so that as residents, we have a little bit more transparency, that we know why things aren't working and why decisions are being made. So more just comments and requests in that sense. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. I can answer that a little bit right now. So yes, and because we did have the petition. We have met with the residents a few times, but also we had our transportation study that was adopted by the council in 2018 that recommended that Jefferson Street as a whole receive a treatment as a bike boulevard, and that's kind of why this has taken maybe a little bit longer than some of the other petitions take, because we've been looking at trying to address the whole segment, the whole section of Jefferson Street. We had the initial, as I mentioned, we had the initial design done by Tool, and we implemented that last year. So they're going to go out and collect some new data and see how those those features that we installed might be changing some of those traffic data. They will put together a report for us, and we will present that to the council and make that available to the public once that report's done later this year. So we will have that available, and you can see some of the data and information that we're using to try to make the best choices we can. The other part of your question was I'm sorry, about the timing of it. Yes, so we are working to try to time the projects to make the most sense, from a financial standpoint, because of the time that it's going to take to do the to finish the analysis, and then we have to put it into the budget to have the actual work done on the road. This work wouldn't be done until the fiscal 25 budget, because the council is discussing the fiscal 24 budget right now. So since we didn't have a design, we couldn't price the project out to put it into the fiscal 24 budget, which begins on July 1st. So we will take the results of this and put it into the fiscal 25 budget request to the council, and then it would be constructed sometime in either late 2024 or early 2025, depending on the schedules of the contractors when the projects are funded and awarded. So we didn't want to wait that long for the street art, and we wanted to get that out there now because it's something we had talked about, last summer, and as we worked through the process and talked to some of the council members, they asked us to put this together as a pilot program, and that's kind of where we are now. So we would like to get the street art out there. It's going to be there for a while before we get the actual in-road work done. We don't know what we're going to do yet, so it might affect the street art, it might not. There are definitely considerations for putting, say, a raised intersection there or raised crosswalks, and depending on what we do, it might not even affect some or all of the work that we're going to do art wise now. So hopefully that helps to answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Were there any other questions? Laura, okay. Let me all right, you should be able to ask your question.
I was going to give time for others, but Damien and I may be the most vested in this one. This question is for Graham. Any tips or do's or don'ts on things to consider when designing?
Well, I'd recommend bright colors and also opportunities for contrast. And so in art, there's sort of two things. There's color and there's value. And so color is, like the Crayola colors, red, blue, yellow, green, etc. Value is the shade, whether or not it's dark or it's light. And so contrast is created not through color, but through value. And so a strong difference between a light or a dark color is what creates contrast. And so in terms of having something that's really strongly legible or visible from the perspective of a motorist, we want to think about things that are very high contrast. And so, for example, a lot of our works will actually mix, bright colors that sort of are on the lighter end of the value, right? And so like a light yellow or a light blue or a pink or something, and then we'll break that up with sections of exposed asphalt, which is of course like a darker sort of gray, dark slate, almost black color. and that creates a nice strong contrast. So that's not unlike what crosswalks do, where you have the white lines against the black pavement marking. So that's one thing I recommend. The other thing too is to think on a big scale, as in from the perspective of car drivers and the general scale of the environment. Everything's really big in public space, and that's one thing that I've learned. In order to compete with public space, we kind of got to think big. And so instead of, let's say, doing like a pattern of small triangles, maybe it's a pattern of big triangles, right? Or maybe it's not necessarily a pattern. Maybe it's just like one huge triangle and a circle and a star and a big flower, but something that would be somewhat legible, in other words, recognizable, or kind of make sense from a little bit of a longer distance, because when cars are driving faster than the speed of pedestrians, they need bigger graphics in order to see what's coming up. And so something that has a lot of like busy things going on in it and smaller details is going to look kind of like a mishmash and maybe not be as visually arresting to the car driver, or the pedestrian for that matter, from that farther distance away, whereas something with like kind of big bold shapes will look good both in person, it'll be very immersive, but it'll also be somewhat legible from farther distances away for cars that are driving at, hopefully top speed of like 15, 20 miles per hour, I'm sure, right? So that's the goal, is getting the speeds down to under 25. I'm not exactly sure what the posted speed is there off the top of my head, but I know the goal is to stop cars from speeding. And in terms of, successful public art, it's the kind of like the big bold shapes and the high contrast is what works well from a sort of a technical side, but also from an experiential side.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't see any other hands right now, so I did want to address one or two of the questions that were put into the Q&A. One of them was that the city did do a street art project at Driscoll Park as part of the park dedication. The question was, did that project result in traffic calming? So that project was not done to necessarily cause traffic calming. It was done as just a public art project to celebrate the dedication of the park. So we didn't have any sort of traffic analysis done. It was designed as part of the overall park dedication ceremony. Another question was, how are the intersections selected and how much will it cost? I live at Jefferson and 42nd, and I've seen way worse than at 40th. Even along 42nd is worse. So these initial locations were chosen due to resident petitions. The Jefferson and 40th location was a probably about 18 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. There was a resident petition for some traffic calming at that intersection, and we tried a couple things as Public Works while we brought on Tool Design to help us come up with another plan, and then they are currently evaluating that plan. And we are definitely aware of some of the issues at Jefferson and 42nd, and we have done some additional traffic calming items there, including the LED blinking stop signs to help increase awareness of the intersection and help to make it more obvious to drivers that there is an intersection there. We can definitely look at that for a future painting project, but it's not going to be part of the pilot program. We're just starting with these two locations, and then we will look at other locations as we either do projects to repair the road, or we address traffic problems and resident complaints. And then the last question in the Q&A. Oh, nope, there's two more questions in the Q&A. The one question was asking about the traffic calming project done on Jefferson. And has the evaluation already been completed or will be completed before the paint goes down? I think it's important to evaluate the sharrows and other things that we tried before we create this new street art. So the evaluation is going on currently. We are currently setting up some community meetings to be held. I don't know if we have an exact date yet, but it should be in the May to June timeframe, where we will get feedback from residents on the work that was done. And then Tool will take that information back. They'll take the data they're collecting on traffic back and evaluate them for any permanent changes that we would like to make in that corridor. It will they will be evaluating everything, including the sharrows and the street signage, and all the other markings that were done. So those things will be looked at. The street art was something that was always intended to be added to the street, and will be also looked at as the study progresses. Let's see. There's one more. Nope. Let me see. The one has disappeared. Okay. So I believe I got all of the Q&A questions. Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, well, seeing no other additional questions, I will close out this meeting now. I want to thank everybody for participating, and definitely check out the Hello Hyattsville site, and share your ideas. Let your neighbors know. The more ideas, the better of a design that Graham and his team can put together for us. So.
Paul, before we wrap up, we did get
Yes.
one more question in the Q&A, asking how kids can participate.
Excellent question. So Graham did mention it briefly, but Graham and his team will be at the city's anniversary celebration at Driscoll Park on the 29th. So we'll have paper copies there. We'll have some crayons and the kids can come out, they can draw them there, they could take it home. If you would like, you can go to the website, you can print out the flyer. If you did not receive one at your door, you can print out the flyer from the website, you can draw on it there. You can either take a photo and send it in, or you can drop off the paper copy of the flyer at the city building. And we will put all of that together as Graham and his team looks at all the submissions.
Correct. And also when we get to installation at 40th and Jefferson, there'll be an opportunity for a community day. Typically we try to keep these, a couple hours so it's manageable for families, but we'll have, like a station, doesn't matter your age or ability, where you can participate in helping to extend that artwork onto the sidewalks themselves. And we'll be out there with our team managing all that. So it'll be real nice and tidy and look great and a fun experience for all, hopefully.
All right, great. Anybody have any last words for the few folks remaining? No, great. All right, thank you everybody, and have a good evening.